Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. In case this is your first visit to Shop Talk, welcome. Glad to have you. If not, we're still glad to have you. Maybe not quite as glad to have you as if this was your first visit. I guess familiarity breeds contempt, as the saying goes. But it's only a small amount of contempt. It's not a lot of contempt, just a small amount. Nonetheless, I have with me a co-host who is hopefully going to keep me on the straight and narrow tonight so that I won't go rambling off into whatever briar patches of wildness we went into last time around. So I have with me Mala. How's it going, Mala?
Good evening, everyone.
So Mike and Tracy are still on their spirit quest. They're on ayahuasca-fueled fever dreams and starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers now. So we'll see when they come back. But we have, I wouldn't call it a packed show, but we do have a show. We have plans. And one of the plans for Shop Talk is that I need to actually start up my little screen that tells you what Shop Talk is all about. Right at the bottom. Boom. So right there. So if you have data platform related questions, things you wanted us to talk about, this is technically a bit of Q&A. This is a bit of drop in some questions. We'll give you some answers. Those answers might be correct answers. They hopefully will be at least entertaining answers if they're not correct. So you may have some axis. Your x-axis might represent level of entertainment. Your y-axis may represent the correctness of the question. And we're looking for that productivity frontier, that point on the frontier, which is probably going to look like a little part of a parabola. And we're going to try to find some point on that curve and move like 30% in, because we're not that entertaining and we're not that correct. But we're going to get closer to there than if you just, I don't know, went on an ayahuasca-fueled fever dream and started quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, enough Steelers jokes. There will be no. Actually, we're probably not going to have any more Steelers jokes. So, and frankly, they weren't even Pittsburgh Steelers jokes. They were Aaron Rodgers jokes. We all know what we were talking about there. If you did not know what we were talking about, welcome to Shop Talk. So, we do have, other than my rambling, we actually have some things that I wanted to talk about. And one of them, big one, came out today. Yes, today is the 8th. So it came out today. Unfortunately, the one and only Phil Factor has passed away. So his real name was Andrew Clark. I had no idea. He was very good at not telling people his name. But if you were ever a reader of Redgate and Simple Talk, you knew who Phil Factor was, because he wrote for Simple Talk for quite some time, had a lot of really good articles, had a lot of really thoughtful pieces of work, and unfortunately, he did pass away. He was apparently a site editor for several years, and again, had no idea of that either. But Tony Davis. Sorry, Tony. Tony Davis wrote a bit about this, about his thoughts, about his work with Phil, and I think it was nice. It was pretty solid. Very nice write-up, very nice send-off, and science fiction author working among them, but he was not around to make that connection. Yeah. And there are some nice responses in the chat here. Peter Larson, Victoria Holt. Interesting. So Victoria actually has a video from Mr. Phil Factor himself. And Alan White. Alan White is still kicking. That's good. Alan, I know Alan is doing his thing up in the Cleveland area. He's retired. He's doing a lot of singing. He's doing a lot of Philharmonic style work. So it's good to see. And Lewis Davidson, Atom Mechanics. So there were some good write-ups here. What I wanted to do, because I never knew the guy, but I did know his writing. And there were some articles that I absolutely loved. My favorite of all time was this one, When the Fever is Over and One's Work is Done. This is the single most impressive takedown of the entity attribute value anti-pattern that I had ever read. And so one true lookup syndrome or entity attribute value disease, he puts mumps. This should be all caps mumps because that would be the programming language, which is also a disease. But I love the style of writing that he had, where he was able to be a bit irreverent. He was able to be pretty humorous and clever in his writing, while also talking about very technical topics in a way that made sense, even if you weren't necessarily very technically inclined. So I think he had that down really well. And if you have never read this article, you can see this is actually a very long article. And there are a lot of comments in here as well. But the article, pretty lengthy, worth the read. Basically, he's talking about a story about how at a startup, he had to come up with a system really quick. He's like, oh, well, this way I don't have to make any database changes. And it worked really well for the demos. And then they're like, well, when do we get it in production? And it turns out to be horrible in production because, of course, it does. It doesn't scale at all. But for very small systems, very small demo-style systems, hey, it works okay. It's just you kind of have to get over the idea that I have come up with the ultimate database pattern where never again will I need to make any changes to the database. I have come up with the table, the one table that will rule them all. Or maybe I'll have the integer table and the string table and the decimal table. You'll see that variant as well sometimes. None of them work. But that is probably my favorite article from Phil. And Mala had this one that I don't know if you want to spend any time talking about it. SQL clone PowerShell scripting.
So that's actually SQL clone PowerShell scripting, but it helped me script all kinds of different things because of his usage of PowerShell and how well he's used, created those commandlets. I used it to create some database object scripting in our environment. After you deploy some code, auto script whatever changes went into the repo. Uh, it's a bit different from scripting a clone, of course, but I appreciated the techniques he'd used it, especially to somebody who's not not a huge PowerShell expert. The code is extremely well written, simple, easy to understand, and it does the job. It does all that it wanted to do. That's why, I mean, I have a lot of his articles that are my favorites, and I just picked one to post on the channel that Kevin and I on. That's all. I have several of his that I've learned from and really find useful. I post another one in the Slack about DDL, the stairways to DDL metadata. That is also a very, very good post for someone who wants to manage database scripts. And that's just one article out of the whole thing, the stairways series that SQL Server Central runs. But the series of articles, extremely good and very useful to understand. So, yeah.
Yeah, let me.
There is another one that I could not find. I was searching for when I found this actually. The one that Kevin shared before is the one on SMO and database scripting. That's also an extremely good one, considering that it was written for SQL Server 2005 or 8 or something like that. And you can still use it for today's versions with some small tweaks. That's how something that stands the test of time is among the qualities of a well-written piece of code, and that certainly is like that.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I could
So
not I could not find that article though. So maybe he titled it different than what I was looking for. I don't know.
that's possible. And I will also
Yeah.
say
Mhm.
he had several workbench articles where
Mhm. Mhm.
he and was it Robin Mundy? Um, I remember that she was a television actress and had also co-written some articles with him. But they had workbench articles that showed up on Simple Talk and were really well done in the sense of this is how you build out a test bench where you don't have real tooling. In SQL, we don't have good tools for proper testing, in part because you don't necessarily need great tools for testing. You have the REPL, you have the ability to basically say, open up a new script. This is your test environment. This is your
Uh-huh.
test bed. You can write these things. You don't have to write 500 lines of code building scaffolding in order to create tests. So you just have a SQL statement or a series of SQL statements. And the way that he would lay those out was, I think it was very influential in how I did a lot of my own test bed development. And I'm going to see if I can pull up one of those articles, because I think they were pretty solid. So in the meantime, if anybody in chat has anything you remembered, um, any good articles you remember from him, or uh, anything along those lines. I doubt any of us have ever met him in person.
Looking at the picture that Victoria posted and such, I think I might have seen the guy. I certainly didn't know that he was, this person. Obviously not. But I might have seen him at the summit.
That's quite possible.
Right.
And Robin Page, that was her name. She was an author at Simple Talk who, let me see, the SQL Server Matrix Workbench. Okay, here's a good example of one. So, pulling this up, I'll drop the link in chat because it's what we do here. And this was from 2008. So a lot of the best writing was almost 20 years ago, but matrix operations in SQL Server. So you could do these. You can do these. It's just a question of, to what extent do you want to do these? And also, it probably looks a little bit better if you have it at proper zoom. Oh, look, they do with rollup. That's neat. But anyhow, there were several of these, and I always appreciated the level of thought that went into the articles. The way that we would see the results, the way that we would see the queries, the way that they would line up, the way that would work out, and kind of telling that story, which, I mean, when I say it out loud, you might say, well, duh, shouldn't a good article tell a story and lay things out appropriately? Yes, it should. Now, how often does that happen? Way under 100%. So to that end, I have a lot of respect for Andrew, otherwise known as Phil. And the last thing I'm going to cover, this one is Confessions of an IT Manager. This is basically a 300-page collection of his different opinion pieces and articles. So it covers some of the ones that we talked about, and a lot of it was humor, was a little bit of fun. Most importantly, this is free. You can get the PDF for free. And basically, this is it was a fun book. I still have a PDF copy of it somewhere around, but there are a series of different articles that he wrote, having a lot of fun with the idea that he looked, in his own words, he looked dopey, he looked dumb, and so people would always assume he was dumb, and thus they would tell the truth around him because they wouldn't expect that he would actually recognize what's going on, which I don't know how much of that was just his tongue-in-cheek sense of humor, but there were some nice, really good articles in here. And if you want to have some fun, here's When the Fever is Over and One's Work is Done. That's the article that I mentioned. But cowboy coding, hiring and firing, so all kinds of different stories about the technical world from a specific point in time. So it is available for free. You can click on this link down near the bottom and get a free PDF copy. You could, actually, I don't know if you can still get a copy on Amazon, if you can get the print copy. Let's find out. You can actually still get the print copy. There's one left in stock. So, dear viewers, If you want to get this one, there's one left in stock right now. Apparently, it is in used condition. So I don't think they're printing these anymore. So if you want to get that paper copy, well, you can get a used copy, which means I would actually search for somewhere else like isbn.new if you were really, really interested in getting a paper copy. Otherwise, go get the free copy. Go grab this. Have some fun. It's 300 pages. It's pretty light reading. These articles were not very technical, not in the sense of we're going to teach you a lot of specific concepts and terminology, and instead would be the type of water cooler story that you would get when sitting in a room with older people who've been through a lot, and they're just telling stories back and forth. So that's the type of article that showed up in this particular publication, and they were, on the whole, really good. So definitely recommend it. Definitely recommend going out and grabbing a copy of it, especially given the price. But that was topic number 1, and as I'm looking through here, we don't have a lot more topics, so we're gonna have to stretch this one out a little bit.
Thank you, Kevin. That's an amazing book.
Oh yeah. I highly recommend. I mean, long before he passed away, I was recommending it to people, so still recommended. Next article. What's next for Copilot in SQL Server Management Studio? And this comes from Aaron Stellato, who is in charge of the tools team over at SQL Server tools team. And so she mentioned that with SSMS 21, Copilot in SQL Server Management Studio was released in preview. And basically, if you needed to set this up, you had to set up your own endpoint and deployment in Azure OpenAI. Doing that isn't really that challenging. However, there are certain restrictions. One of those restrictions is you have to be able to go out and access the internet. You have to be able to hit the Azure OpenAI servers. There is a cost associated with it. There are some setup challenges that can happen depending on firewall rules or IP restrictions or the like. And as a result, basically what Aaron thought at first was, at some point, we might have to support GitHub Copilot, but this seems like it's going to be pretty solid considering that you can get the same GPT-4 or GPT-4o or now GPT-5. You can get that same model working instead of using GitHub Copilot. But apparently, there is a feedback item for GitHub Copilot support, and it ended up having 233 votes over the course of several months. So this was reported in late May and had gotten up to 233 votes. So that was a pretty big one. There were a lot of people who basically said, yes, I want GitHub Copilot in SQL Server Management Studio, as opposed to rolling your own Azure OpenAI deployment and using it. And so essentially what Aaron is saying here is, okay, we explored a proof of concept using GitHub Copilot, and most people who took the survey said they wanted to use GitHub Copilot instead of roll your own. So they're basically the rest of this article is Aaron talking about what's going to happen, what does the future look like, what does the present look like, what some of the challenges are going to be associated with it. So basically, if you are using Copilot in SSMS 21, it's going to stay the same. It's not changing. You will not have to switch over to GitHub Copilot as long as you're using SSMS 21. But when you leave SSMS 21, there will not be any more roll your own Copilot. So you're not going to have the ability to use an Azure OpenAI deployment in the same way. So I'll be specific there. It won't be exactly the same. But they are not going to develop it further. So if you find a bug in Copilot and SSMS 21, wait for the next release and use the new mechanism, I guess. Although she does say bug fixes aside. So I guess we'll see. It depends on the nature of the bug, I would suppose. If it's a big bug, they're probably going to say, wait for the next. If it's a small bug, they'll probably fix it. When SSMS 22 comes out, looks like they're going to try to make it at least feature compatible with SSMS 21's Copilot preview, but it will take some time to get there. So they're going to try to also make it similar to what's available in Visual Studio. And if you need to control your model, GitHub Copilot does support connecting out to Azure OpenAI or OpenAI or Google models, Anthropic models. So if you want to connect out to Claude or Gemini or your own GPT deployment, those API key-based connections are available. You don't have to use the GitHub Copilot variants of GPT 4.0. I think they're still on 4.0. But you don't have to use the GitHub versions of those. You can bring your own if you have that available. I also don't know. It looks like, based on this explanation, I'm not sure if you'll have the ability to bring your own local model. And I'm currently reading the providers. I don't think you have the ability to bring a local model. I think you have to go with Anthropic, Google, OpenAI, just looking at what they have available. So you might not be able to have a local language model that is running on GPU somewhere in your own environment and thus not allow your machines to reach out to the internet. So in certain secured environments, that may be a no-go. That may be a non-viable option. And in those cases, you're not going to be able to do this. So why can't you just make it work? I like this question. It's one of those questions where the person who understands that SSMS is based off of the Visual Studio shell and says, well, if this works in the Visual Studio, why can't it work for you? Aaron does have a solid reason. Basically, look, GitHub Copilot, the way it works in Visual Studio is for application development. And there's a specific workflow around how that operates. But for database development, it's a very different world. We're not working the same way as application developers do. And so the interaction points are probably not going to be exactly the same. You also don't have as the ability, say, to read a database for retrieval augmented generation. GitHub Copilot will read files. It'll read the file that you currently have open and can use that as context for answering questions or for generating code. But it's not going to be able to connect to this database and this system and retrieve data via queries. Those sorts of things, the tools team is going to have to add. So as a result, it's not just a simple copy-paste you're in. The first public preview is not going to include anything with Copilot. So keep that in mind if you're a preview junkie. Now, if you're still using SSMS 18, none of this really matters to you. You're just far enough behind that whatever. I'm just using whatever's installed on the machine. And you're probably not going to care too much. But if you are the type of person who wants to keep up on what's happening in the latest variants of SQL Server Management Studio, do keep that in mind that if you're trying out the newest preview that will come out, has not come out yet, will come out, then you will not have any of these options, but that it will probably happen in a later variant. Will you backport GitHub Copilot to SSMS 21? The answer is no. You'll use 22. Do you need a GitHub Copilot subscription? Yes, which means you're going to have to pay money unless your company has GitHub Copilot Enterprise or something, GitHub Enterprise that includes Copilot, or you're paying for Copilot, then it's coming out of pocket somewhere. You can use a personal subscription, or a company can have a business or enterprise subscription. So basically follows along with what I had mentioned. There is a free personal subscription for GitHub Copilot, so you could check that out. And let me actually bring up this link. Just I've not read this, so we're doing that live, people. We're doing my normal thing of trying to get 2 sentences ahead and make it sound like I know what I'm talking about. GitHub Copilot free allows you to experience blah, blah, blah. Okay, you can access blah, blah, blah. What do you need? You need Visual Studio 2022. You can activate Copilot free at the first launch. So, little button here, sign up for Copilot free. There are usage limitations, limited number of code completions and chat responses per month. When you reach that limit, then you'll get a notification, and basically it's going to say, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. When you reach usage limits, you will get IntelliCode's suggestions. So IntelliSense will pick back up instead of Copilot completions. If you get the chat limits, chat responses will no longer come back. And can I turn off completions to save them for later? Yes, you can. You can turn them off and on. So there are some features that are available for free. So you could try that out if you so desire. And apparently, it will work for SSMS 22 when they get the Copilot connection set up. So if you are using the free license, okay, it seems like it'll work okay. If I like GitHub Copilot for MS SQL and VS Code, will I like it in SSMS? That's a great question. The answer is maybe. Just because now that I no longer use Visual Studio on a really any basis, I use it so infrequently. I have used Visual Studio Code as my go-to development platform for the last several years. It's way better than Visual Studio. There are specific use cases where, particularly if you're developing .NET code, where Visual Studio can still be a better feeling than VS Code. I think its debug experience is a little bit more well-defined and easier to work with. But other than that, I prefer VS Code for pretty much everything. Like right now, I have several instances of VS Code open. I have 0 instances of Visual Studio open. In fact, if I type in Visual Studio, I do have VS 2022 installed on this machine, but I don't remember the last time I used it. So as far as how that ties in with Copilot, I have not. No, I can't say that. I have used Copilot in Visual Studio once or twice just to try it out. It's okay. It works fine. It works fine in VS Code as well. I don't know that there's a drastic difference between the two in terms of experience. So I would expect that if you like it in VS Code, you're probably going to like it in Visual Studio, and you'll probably like it in Management Studio. That would be, again, my guess. But who knows? Who knows?
So far, the reviews of SSMS AI have not been very positive. So maybe going the GitHub way is going to improve on that, I think. But we have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's possible, and I'm wondering if maybe I don't know. I haven't read much in the way of reviews of it. I'm gonna assume some of the problem is probably along the lines of not getting good results back, or writing some really bad queries that hit the database to grab information. Those would be my guesses as to some of the pain points people are experiencing.
I'll
And
find a blog post or two. There are a few on that.
yeah, and then we can talk about that here, because right now I'm in vamp mode because those were our 2 topics for the night. So unless we're going to talk about Sunday Night Football for the next half hour, and
No, there's one I gave you on the. You don't have to, Kevin, but the one on the OpenAI article on why the hallucinations happen. I thought that was interesting. I got about 5 minutes into reading it. I haven't read all of it entirely, but you may have more insight into what they're saying there. I don't know how legitimate that is. But anyway, I'm posting the review Brent Ozar had on the SSMS AI
All right.
compared to other AI tools.
Yeah, and by the way, the article that Mala's talking about, I've got it up on the page right here. We're probably gonna have to wait till next time to talk about it because I read the abstract and I
Uh-huh.
said to the abstract,
Uh,
"This sounds bogus. This sounds very
right.
bogus."
Uh-huh.
But I wanted to read the article because the abstract anthropomorphizes everything. Oh well, the hallucinations arise through statistical pressures because we're pressuring the language model to answer in a specific way, and we're training it, we're teaching it to think in this particular way and to guess, like an SAT question where
Right.
guessing is never a bad idea. And that's
Uh-huh.
how you get hallucinations. And I'm thinking to myself, well, there's no thought in there. So you're anthropomorphizing the entire process of generating tokens and uh, penalizing uncertain responses. I mean, they're talking about existing benchmarks that are misaligned but dominate leaderboards. But here's the problem: you've already trained your model before the leaderboard comes out. So the leaderboard comes out and says and indicates that your model is garbage. Oh, well, obviously our model is garbage because of the socio-technical problems. It's all society's fault. It's society's fault my model makes stuff up. Well, no, it's not society's fault your model makes stuff up. It's not the test's fault that you make up answers. The test is elucidating the fact that the language model you're using generates bogus results because it doesn't have a truth model. There is no such concept as truth in a language model. There is only next token, next token, next token. And so I want to read this because these are all people at OpenAI, except for this one person at Georgia Tech. Um, and so I don't want to put too much into the abstract, but that's as far as I got before I said, "Oh, I would need to
Uh-huh.
take some real time to read it."
Fair enough. So I posted Brent Ozar's review on the SSMS.
All right,
And yeah.
let's take a look at this. I don't remember that I read. I must have read it, but I probably didn't think too much about it because I tend when I see people talking about AI tools, generally, my eyes start glazing over and I say, whatever. All right, user interface is fine. It does not feel buggy, but the advice is simply terrible due to the prompt that Copilot is using. Interesting. Okay, so uh, Brent has a stored procedure that calls a scalar function row by row and performs poorly. All right, so we have user defined stored procedure.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the USP underscore. We have a function user has voted. So we see this user is voted equals 0, which queries the votes table and sees if there are any records. I mean, this is a pretty trivial example of this is bad, but nonetheless, you ask ChatGPT, and Brent has his prompt here, and here are some of the things. Don't use a scalar function in the where clause. Replace it with a left join or a not exists. Left outer join is probably, I would say it's doable, but probably dumb because you're going to not take advantage of the anti-join, the ability to anti-join, which a not exists clause will do.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Yes.
So anyhow, try Gemini. Scalar UDF in the where clause. Okay. Inline the scalar function logic. Okay. Yeah, not
Yeah,
exists.
yeah, yeah.
And if we scroll down, All right, SSMS Copilot. Note that Copilot specifically says slow query.sql. Okay. I've Copilot pointed to my Azure OpenAI account using GPT-4o, which at that time was the only model supported. It probably, I forget if GPT-4o is still supported officially, but it doesn't matter. Copilot's advice, hot garbage. All right, let's see why. Set statistics IO time on and set show plan text on. Okay, well that's not very helpful. Table scans, high cost operations, missing indexes. This is just generic advice. Check for missing or inefficient indexes, which was already one of the points. Optimize the query logic. Reduce the number of rows processed. Avoid select star. Now up here in the query itself, there is technically a p dot star, so it is everything in posts. But that's really dumb.
That's not the reason for
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Simplify your joins. Avoid correlated subqueries and replace them with common table expressions. Look, I'm a bigger fan of common table expressions than probably anybody on here or who will watch this video. Common table expressions sit like 2 steps below the apply operator in terms of amount of love in my shriveled, blackened heart. And I'm going to say you can't make a correlated subquery faster by switching it to a common table expression. They're both going to perform the same at best. Neither one of them will necessarily make a query faster. You can screw up one or the other to make it slower, but you don't make things faster with common table expressions. So, yeah, replace a correlated subquery with a join. I mean, that's typically the reason that you have a correlated subquery is because you can't have a simple join, because there are more complex clauses or filters that you want to have operating and that you don't necessarily want to bring to your multi-billion row table when you're throwing out 99% of the data, that kind of thing. Oh, hey, you can update your statistics. You can investigate parameter sniff. This feels like the advice that you would get from not even the junior DBA, the DBA who's been around for 20 years, but has spent 20 years learning the same thing and over and has just been trying to coast for the last like 18 years. Where, oh, well, this query, you should update your statistics. You know, updating statistics is important. It'll make the query run faster. Check for blocking or deadlocks. Well, your query finished. It was slow, so obviously no deadlocks occurred. Using no lock hints. I mean, that's just dumb. Reducing the transaction scope. You're effectively doing the same thing. If you start out and read committed, then read uncommitted is about as far as you can reduce it. So, again, dumb. Partition large tables, which is not a performance improvement technique. You do not improve performance by partitioning. I wish you did, but you don't. It just doesn't work that way. Like for every one case where you can make queries faster using partitioning, you have 99 cases where the query does not get faster, and you have 3 cases where the query gets actively slower. So number 7 is just bad advice. That's bad internet advice. I could go back to the Kindra Little articles that show just how little, no pun intended, the effectiveness is of partitioning in terms of performance.
I think Kimberly Tripp had one too.
Who had one as well?
Kimberly, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Kimberly Tripp. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Kindra's article. This was from a while ago as well. So optimize temp table usage. There wasn't temp table usage on there. So there were no temp tables. Use query hints. Review stored procedure logic. Oh, good. Review the logic. Check for unnecessary loops or cursor usage. Replace them with set-based operations. Like, this is the kind of garbage that you would expect from the senior person who's retired on the job. Yeah, there we go, Brent. Partitioning. Are you kidding me right now? Exactly. This is about as dumb as it gets. Okay, so what about indexing recommendations? So Brent tried out a bunch of different indexes that are not great. A lot of wide includes, common includes, some duplication. So we have location, display name, location, last access date and display name, last access date and location. Like a lot of overlap where obviously half of these are not necessary because they are strictly overlaps. Some of these, you can make the argument that this index, that index, one of these two indexes. If you have a lot of queries where the display name is your primary filter. Oops, I did not intend to change this from nicely formatted to. Oh, there we go. I need to untoggle that. If you have a lot of cases where you're filtering on the one display name and then location is broad, and if you have a lot of queries where you're filtering on very specific locations and then you have a broader search for display names, you might see a case where both of those indexes could be useful. But in practice, you're probably going to figure out which one of these is more selective, and which one of them happens to show up more often. If you have half of your queries use location and half of them use display name, then, and let's say as the first column, half and half, and then like 10 to 20% of those queries use the other one as well. So 50% of the time you're using location. Of that 50, 10% of the time you're using display name as well. And then you have, let's say 50% of the time you're using display name. And of that, 10% of the time you're using location as well. So 20% of the time you're using both. You probably still don't need both of these. You probably could get away with, let's say, location display name and then just display name. But again, this would all depend on the actual access patterns of the queries that are using the specific indexes. So long story short, we can see very clearly there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of, technically none of these are truly duplicative indexes, but they are effectively duplicate indexes. There's nothing in line 1 and 2, that first display name, that you don't get out of this index, except this one is slightly longer. So Copilot says, no missing index recommendations. No changes are needed. Whereas ChatGPT 4o, literally the same language model, spat out some results that said, hey, some of these you may not need. So ultimately, the problem is, as Brent argues, the problem is that the prompt is the issue. And please focus on specific actionable advice rather than vague best practices. Update, no, I'm not holding it wrong. So in the comments, I was informed the way I should have used Copilot was not to ask it questions, but to script out the stored procedure, right-click on it, and click on refactor. And he says, no, that doesn't do anything better. Because if you click on that, the code refactor still ignores the scalar function. So if we look at the refactor example over here, refactored version of the query, find interesting post for user, you'll see that the function is still there. So it's still bad. In fact, I don't know that anything really changed.
Nothing much. It's only made it a little pretty to look at.
Okay.
As far as I can see, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything else. And actually, wait a minute. Let me see if Brent had it right originally. Oh, there was no select top one. So what is this? If since date is null, select top one since date. Oh. Okay, the top one.
Yeah, that's okay. That's not bad. Okay. Yeah. Maybe.
That's okay. Yeah. That actually that is a minor improvement. Top one there because it can cause to the query to stop after one. So the
Yeah.
top iterator will kick in and prevent this from being a full scan of votes. Okay, that's an improvement. However, technically this needs to be in parentheses. If you're using top with a number, this T-SQL syntax says there need to be parentheses around that top or around that number one. But yeah, otherwise, this was not great. So that was Brent basically saying, hey, SSMS Copilot in SSMS 21 hasn't worked out so well. And I guess my answer is probably not. We'll see how SSMS 22 handles things.
Right.
All right. So we've got a few minutes. I probably will cut things a little bit short tonight. We went long last time around. I got caught on a train of thought, and that train just kept going and going. But tonight I actually do have to drive right after this. So I'll be in a car of thought, but a physical car of thought as opposed to a metaphorical train of thought, which was last time. Also, I really didn't have anything else to cover. So we are going to vamp just a little bit. I will note we have a brand new month. And what that means is we have a brand new set of presentations going on. So first things first, on Tuesday the 9th, which is tomorrow, we have Haripriya Naidu. So she is going to talk to us about memory optimized TempDB. And that's a topic that I know some of us in here have worked with in the past. I think it'll be interesting. Potential topics: spaces versus cursors. I don't hate you, Solomon. I appreciate the troll. I appreciate it. I think it's at least a B+ troll. And so I like that. Spaces get you paid more money. Cursors don't get you more money, but they are morally superior to the while loop. As much as DBAs, I don't want to sound like Anders here. So don't get me confused with someone who likes cursors. But if you're going to live in rebar, you might as well do it right. You might as well go fancy rebar as opposed to poor man's rebar. In other words, you should have the proper rebar that was appropriately manufactured and is cut out, as opposed to like Meth Head Johnny's rebar factory, which is going out to the construction site and stealing some iron. So that's my thought. And the while loop is the meth head answer for row by agonizing row. So that's my hot take for the night. And basically the while loop is bath salts for your database. All right. So tomorrow we have that. Not bath salts for the database, but memory optimized TempDB for faster performance. Next Tuesday, Andy Yoon is going to be talking to us remotely, but we will be in person because we're going to be at Tech Systems. A practical introduction to vector search in SQL Server 2025. So Andy's going to be remotely attending. It worked a little. Yeah, you got some time out of it. You got me to come up with as wild a metaphor as I possibly could, and so as a B+, definitely a B+. Also, tabs are morally superior, but spaces do get you paid more money. All right. Next Tuesday, Andy's going to talk vector search. He'll talk about what it looks like in SQL Server 2025. He has a full database. It's like a 22 gigabyte database of recipes that are all vectorized. So you can do searches and figure out, finally, conclusively, how much glue should you put on your pizza. Because GPT engines will give you different numbers. But now Now you can ask and get the right answer. And fourth Tuesday of September, we have the presentation is called Mastering Storytelling with BI. So getting an idea of how to tell that data story. Data storytelling, so this is going to be on the 23rd. And
who's presenting that, Kevin?
that is Shubhangi Goyal, who is out of the UK.
Oh, okay.
So again, we have another UK presentation for our data science, business intelligence, artificial intelligence, and all the other things special interest group. So we'll have another person late at night. It tends to work out pretty well. And, we'll see how that works. But those are all coming up. That's what's coming up over the next 3 weeks. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got another episode of Shop Talk happening 2 weeks from today. We're going into September, and we've got a packed program. So we hope that we'll be able to see you throughout the course of this month. And I think, unless you have any other topics, I think we're going to call it.
No, I'm out of topics.
Fair enough. Yep. I'm out of topics. Salman got his one topic. It was good. It was worth several minutes. So that was quality. It was worth at least 10%, approximately 10% of this broadcast. So that was all dedicated. So it was quality. But we are going to wind things down just a little bit early today. So fortunately, I don't have any advertisers who demand that I have to fill a certain amount of airtime. I don't have broadcast networks who need me to go to the top of the hour. So we're going to wrap things up and say, again, if you want to come out tomorrow, we do have our advanced DBA group. It's going to be interesting. Check that out. All of this at meetup.com/tripass, meetup.com/TRIPASS. And until we see each other at a future SQL Server user group meeting or wherever, everybody, take care.